Hey everyone, my name is Frank. Welcome to my channel where I talk about all things bookish. So today I wanted to make a fun, just unscripted, let's shoot the shit video where I talk about my opinion on DNFing books and I don't know, hear what you guys have to say about it. This is one of the few things I think in the bookish community where our opinion is really just that. If we want to DNF books, we can. If someone doesn't want to DNF a book, they don't have to. And that decision really doesn't affect readership at large in any other way. It's just our personal opinion, and I love that. So the reason I'm making this video, one is because I realized that outside of my book reviews, every video I've made is kind of serious and I dive into deeper, more important topic about the bookish community at large. And although I am a pretty serious and intense person, even in real life, I do think that it's important to show you guys that I am not just like a giant dickhead all of the time. So that's part one of why I wanted to make this video. The second is that honestly, I was scrolling through TikTok and this guy's video popped up where he was talking about how for most of his life as a reader, he's been firmly in the camp of anti DNF. And that recently he has come across a book that he's just not enjoying, and it's kind of changing his mind a little bit about DNFing books, and he's kind of leaning towards not finishing the book. And he was asking other people's opinions on DNFing books. And so I left a comment and I was like, oh, well, I've DNF'd 3 books this week alone. And although that was actually really true, it was weird because they were also the only 3 books I have DNF'd so far in 2026. It just happened to be that they were back to back to back. For some reason, I don't know what was going on. I was getting into a bit of a reading slump or something, but I felt like every book I was picking up was just not the right book for me. And I'm going to talk about those 3 books in a second, but he responded to my comment. He's like, wow, that's impressive. He's like, what is your personal criteria for DNFing? And it kind of got me thinking about that. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you exactly what makes me DNF a book. So the first thing is that I am definitely a vibe mood reader. If I'm reading something and it's just not the right moment for me, it's not that the writing is bad or that I don't like the characters or anything like that. It's mostly just like whatever is happening in the story is just not what I want to be reading. Sometimes it's just not the right genre. Even if it is a good book, objectively, like a well-written, well-paced, interesting characters and all that, sometimes I just don't want to read that. Sometimes I just want to read something else. And so I'll DNF it. And sometimes I'll go back to it because, like I said, it's not that it's poorly written. It's just not what I wanted to read at that moment. So that makes up probably, I would say, half of the DNFs that I have. The other half is that for some reason, I'm just not vibing with the characters. And I will ask myself the question of, do I care what happens? Do I actually care what happens to these people? Do I actually care what's going to happen in this story? And if the answer is no, then I put the book down. It's really that simple. If I have gone far enough into the book that I feel that by that point, the author should have made me care about those characters and they haven't done that, I'm not going to continue reading. So that was the case with 2 of the 3 books that I DNF'd this past week. The first book, and this one was actually really disappointing because this was a book that I was anticipating to be one of my favorite releases for the year. This was Operation Bounce House by Matt Dinniman. And you have probably heard his name before. He is also the author of the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, which I have all 7 books. I have all 7 ebooks and I've been waiting to get to that, but I have been postponing it because I have a really hard time reading book series. I prefer standalones, which is why I was so excited about Operation Bounce House, because this was a standalone sci-fi novel by this author. And the way that people talk about the DCC series is with very high praise. And so I was very much looking forward to Operation Bounce House. Unfortunately, I did DNF it at about 20% of the way through because I did not like these characters at all. It went beyond me not caring about them. It fully went into the territory of, I don't like these people. And it was upsetting because the premise of it was really cool, right? It's these third generation settlers on this new colony planet called New Sonora. And for some reason, people of Earth want to resettle this planet. And so they have started this 5-day long campaign to basically kill everybody on the planet and resettle it for themselves. And it's very interesting because a lot of the settlers on this planet, they are farmers. They're not well equipped to handle a campaign like that. And our main character, Oliver, has a sister named Lulu, who is a sex worker. She is a very famous streamer on this universe's equivalent of OnlyFans. I can't remember what the actual name of the site is called in the book, but she's basically an OnlyFans creator, and she's a very popular one. She makes a lot of money, but all of her money is in a bank account on Earth that she can't access until the quarantine that this planet is in is over. So this was interesting. The thing that got me to really DNF it was the fact that Matt Dinniman was kind of harping on her being a sex worker quite a bit. Up until the 20% mark where I DNF'd it, he had brought it up more than a few times. And it was starting to get creepy. It was starting to get weird. It was starting to get uncomfortable for me. I have nothing against sex workers, by the way, or sex work in general. I just was not like it. It was like Oliver was like, oh yeah, I'm so proud of my sister. Not that I'm glad that she does this kind of work. It's just that I'm so proud of her as an older sibling. I hope I have this level of pride in her and her ability to take charge and do what she wants with her life and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, icky. It was rubbing me the wrong way, but I was like, move past it, right? Let me just get through that. And then there's a moment where Oliver's best friend, Sam, who has known Lulu and Oliver their whole life, right? These people, this is not a large planet. And so these people have literally grown up together. They're all in their mid 20s, right? They've known each other their whole life. And Sam is talking to Oliver. They're having a private conversation. And Sam's like, oh, yeah, man, like, I've always wanted to bang your sister. Honestly, I still do want to bang her. And Oliver is like, why are you telling me this? And Sam's like, because I think we're all going to die. Two things to keep in mind, okay? One, this is the very beginning of the book. They haven't even begun to actually fight anybody. They haven't come up against anybody yet. Oliver had a quick issue with one kid earlier in the book, but at this point, they have not even begun to get into the nitty-gritty of the fighting, okay? So it's like, you're already panicking about dying. I can understand being scared, but it was just like, that's such a weird thing to admit at this point in time when you guys are safe. You guys haven't encountered any real danger yet. This isn't a deathbed confession moment yet. So that was weird. The second thing to keep in mind is that Sam has a 7-month pregnant fiance. This woman is 7 months pregnant with his child. So even if you were afraid that you're about to die, why would your first thought, your first concern not be about your unborn child and your fiance? So that was just weird. And as I kept reading along, there was a lot of exposition that felt info dumpy, and it was tactless. Throughout the book, there was that issue going on. But the way that these things were building, all these little issues that I kept having, finally I just got to the point where it's like, oh, wait, no, I don't care. I don't care if you all get blown to bits. I don't care if you all survive. I don't care if you all die. I don't care what happens to your planet. I don't care about what happens to any of these characters. I don't like you. I don't care. And so I DNF'd it. And it was really disappointing. It was unfortunate because, like I said, this was one of my most anticipated books for the year. So wasn't really happy about that. But hey, I'm sure some people liked the book. Maybe it got better. I don't know. It's possible, but I'm not going to find out. So the second book I DNF'd, I picked this up immediately after Operation Bounce House, and this was For Human Use by Sarah G. Pierce. And this was a book that I also was very excited about. The premise of it was very interesting. It's essentially this CEO that has created this app it's like a Tinder dating app kind of thing where you can swipe left or right, but it's for dead bodies. So basically, the people using this app are dating dead people. And I thought that was really interesting. I was very excited to get into whatever commentary the author was trying to make. This was also a debut novel, so I was excited to support this author. I DNF'd it mostly because I just wasn't in the right headspace to continue reading it. It's not that it was gory or graphic or anything like that. It's just I did have an issue a bit with the dialogue tags, or I should say the lack of dialogue tags. There would be moments where there was a conversation happening between characters or whatever it may be. Like, for instance, the first time I encountered this was when Tom, Auden, and the boss, I can't, Kane or something his name was, they were all in Kane's office and they were talking, and there were no dialogue tags. So dialogue was happening, but you didn't really know who was saying what. There were moments where I was confused whether it was Kane or Tom talking, and I had to keep rereading that. And that issue kind of persisted anytime there was dialogue happening between mostly male characters, because up to the point I read, a lot of the dialogue, aside from Auden and his stepsister, Mara or something her name was, aside from that, it was hard to tell who was talking. So I didn't particularly like that, but I was willing to let it go. It's just that a lot of it felt like legal jargon. There wasn't a lot happening between the characters and the actual cadavers. It felt like some weird commentary because at some point, Tom and one of his friends, I forget the guy's name, they're interviewing this focus group of people who are using the app, who have already ordered bodies and had them delivered to their house. And again, it doesn't really explain how this is legal. Maybe it gets more into that later on in the book, but this question is raised a few times and it never gets answered. It's just completely skirted. And I'm like, that doesn't seem right. That doesn't, anyway, again, maybe it gets answered later on in the book. I don't know. But they're having this conversation, they're interviewing this focus group, and a lot of these men are talking about how basically, and they flat out say it, they say it in clear, concise wording where they're like, we're protecting live women from us, right? We cause harm, we're harmful, men are toxic, men are evil, blah, blah, blah. And so by dating these dead women, we are protecting the women who are alive. And I was like, what is that supposed to mean exactly? I don't understand. And maybe it would have become more clear if I had continued to read through the book, right? I don't want to say that the author never answers these questions that are raised, but it wasn't intriguing enough for me. I don't know. Something about it was just, I kept getting pulled out of the story. And I was like, this is not what I want to read right now. This is one of those things where I might actually return to this book at some point. But I did check out a few of the reviews after I DNF'd it. And a lot of people were basically saying the same thing, where they were hoping that things were going to pick up and get exciting, and that most of this book is just legal jargon. It's mostly just explaining the logistics of the app. And yeah, I don't know that I'm interested in that. So maybe I'll get back to it. Maybe I won't. Who really knows? Really quick, if you're enjoying this video so far, go ahead and give it a like, maybe even subscribe if you're into more bookish content. And go ahead and let me know in the comments, do you actually DNF books as well, or are you firmly in the anti-DNF camp? I would love to know. So the third book that I DNF'd was Burnham Wood by Eleanor Catton. And this one actually made me mad. I was actually really thoroughly annoyed at this book. So part of it is because I had high expectations. So if you have seen any of my other videos, maybe you have seen that I did a review of Chain Gang All-Stars by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah. I loved that book. I thoroughly enjoyed that book very much. I felt like the author did a really good job presenting his argument for prison abolition, as well as just creating a very engaging and interesting story with interesting characters. And so I loved it. I thought it was good. So sometimes what I like to do after I read a book, whether I really loved it or really didn't like it, I will go on to Goodreads, even though I don't actually use Goodreads, funnily enough. I use Storygraph and Pagebound to track my reading progress. But I will go on to Goodreads because it's probably the most popular app as far as reviewing books goes, or tracking book progress. So a lot of people use it, and I like to read their reviews. So after I read Chain Gang All Stars, I did go onto Goodreads to check out some of the reviews, and I will always look at the top reviews, but I will also look at the 1 and 2 star reviews. And someone had left a bad review of Chain Gang All Stars, talking about how disappointing it was, how it was just not what they were expecting, and how ultimately part of why they feel that way might be because they had just finished reading Birnam Wood, and that book was just so phenomenal and so excellent and so well written that coming to Chain Gang All Stars immediately after reading it, it was just a bit of a letdown. So I was like, damn, I really enjoyed Chain Gang All Stars. So if this person is feeling like Birnam Wood is an even more well-written book and that Chain Gang was disappointing in comparison, I want to check it out, right? And I read the premise of it, and it's about this almost like anarchist group that basically runs around the city and grows food and plants seeds in all these abandoned places in order to fund their co-op, but also to feed neighbors and all this stuff. And I was like, that's actually really interesting. So I want to read it. Well written where? Well written where? I shit you not, I got 20% of the way through. This is like a 400-page book, by the way. So 20% is a decent-ish way through the book. There were, I'm going to be generous and say maybe 10 lines of dialogue in the first 20% of the book. The rest was exposition. This was reading like a political theory paper, not a fiction novel. This was so convoluted. The run-on sentences, I feel like the average sentence length for this book was like 40 words. Sentences that took up page after page. This was not a well-written book at all. This book felt like the author was like, hey, look at me. I'm so super smart and I know all these big fancy schmancy words, and I'm going to stick them all just right next to each other and talk about a whole lot of nothing. A whole lot of nothing. It literally was so tedious to read. To get 20% of the way through a book for only to find that 2 characters had a conversation. Nothing happened, by the way. The whole 20% that I read, it felt like I was reading her character notes for these characters, how she wanted them to present in the book. So it was like, if we're talking about Matt, it's, oh, he was so smart and he prized his intellect and blah, 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 blah. And it's like that, what is, like, I don't care. I don't care. I do not give a shit. Oh my God. So I'm not sure what this person, I mean, again, books are like, the way that we feel about books is absolutely subjective. And so it is very possible that there are people that really enjoyed this book and then turned around and disliked Chain Gang All Stars, where I'm in the opposite camp, right? I love Chain Gang and I did not like Birnam Wood at all. But I mean, I'm not really sure how anyone could enjoy Birnam Wood. It was a whole lot of nothing. And maybe something interesting happens later on, but I got 20% of the way through the book and not a single thing happened. 2 characters went on a date. When I say went on a date, I mean at that point where I DNF, they just started their date. They just went out on a date. And it was just so tedious. Most of this book was really just the author explaining what kind of person each character was up until that point. And it's like, that's a whole lot of telling and you're not showing me shit. Boring, 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 boring. Oh my God. And it was just like, I'm obviously not a very eloquent and well-spoken person. This video is not scripted at all. And you'll notice in my other videos that are scripted, I'm borderline having a fucking aneurysm trying to focus on my script and also make a video, right? Okay. So I understand I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. I'm not the fucking brightest bulb. I'm okay with that. That's fine. The issue is that, and the thing about it was that I wasn't reading Birnam Wood and having to stop every 2 seconds to look at the dictionary or something like that. I knew all of the words that the author was using. It was so convoluted. It was so unnecessary. the way that this writing went. Like I said, this was reading like a political theory paper. This was reading like someone trying to explain the ins and outs of certain political jargon, that it was just so pretentious, is the way that it was coming off. Why would you make this the most boring book possible? I don't know. Didn't like it. But hey, it was subjective. Some people did obviously enjoy Burnham Wood. So I will not be returning to that book. That's a DNF that's going to sit in that pile forever. Not interested in revisiting that at all. But tell me, do you revisit any of the books that you DNF? Are you a mood reader like me and sometimes it's just not the right fit? Or are you also in the camp of whenever I DNF, that's it. I'm done. No more. I don't want to see it again. Let me know, because obviously I'm both, but hey.